This is my cultural competence in nursing poster that I made of 3 different models that we will be discussing. Right now you're looking at the Purnell model. And this is the Sunrise model. Hopefully you can see everything. There's Madeline. And there is her model. Hopefully it's easy to see for you. And there is the Purnell model. And over here is a very simplistic form of Geiger's assessment model. Alright, so we will begin to talk about these models very briefly before I go into my experience. So, let's talk about the Sunrise model developed by Madeline. Madeline was one of the very first to come up with transcultural nursing even. She was born in Sutton, Nebraska in 1925. In 1925. She received her basic nursing education in 1948 and then went on to get her bachelor's, which she received in 1950. In 1954, she got her Master's of Science in Psychiatric Mental Health, and later, in 1965, she went in to get her PhD in anthropology. It's said that she went into anthropology because she was unfamiliar with the fact that why are so many people getting the same health care? And why aren't we customizing that healthcare based on their culture? And I think the degree in anthropology really put a perspective for her on just that, cultural competence in nursing. So here's her cultural care formula, essentially. I will go over this really quick. There's worldview. That would be humans, essentially. There is cultural and social structure dimensions, you know, American culture, Ohioan culture, Columbus culture. We move on to the domains of that, which are technological, you know, technological factors. Some elderly today aren't very technological savvy. I'm not even technological savvy, but some elderly people aren't technological savvy. So we have to keep in mind if they need to, say, get their charts information online, such as OSU MyChart, we need to make sure that they are aware and understanding of how to get that information, because some people may not be comfortable, you know, with technology, such as computers. We move on to religion and philosophical factors. Everybody has different religions. Everybody's spirituality, ideologies, so on and so forth, is different. Could be different in just even the smallest way, but we have to be aware. We want to respect and acknowledge those, even if they're slim. Kinship and social factors. You know, every culture has a hierarchy or a class of people, whether that's political or what, but, you know, they're in a household, maybe the male may be the dominant figure, or even the female is some. There are cultural values, beliefs, and life ways. Today in 2016 we have homosexual couples that have children, and even some may have grandchildren. So we have to keep that in mind as to not offend somebody's lifestyle choice or so forth. There are political and legal factors. Here in the United States, I wouldn't say that would be a big factor, but different cultures, and especially refugees coming here, that could be something that we have to be aware of, because sometimes what we find illegal, some cultures may not. So, economic factors. Economic plays a huge role in somebody's health, believe it or not. Here at home, especially with socioeconomic factors. Generally, those who have a lower socioeconomic status typically don't seek or get the health care that they deserve, which is unfortunate. Last is educational factors. Educational factors is important because though I may be a registered nurse, someday my patients may have a grade level of 8 or a reading level of 4th grade. So I want to be sure that when they're going home that they are aware of what their responsibilities are to keep up with their health. Here I have the model which it goes even further with the influences, nursing care. We want to make sure that we are preserving that person's culture, maintaining it. We don't want to disgrace that person. We don't want to offend or disrespect. We want to keep that person. We don't want to try to change them based on how we feel or what we believe to be right, because it may not be right to them. Accommodation, negotiation. Say somebody's, some cultures use herbal supplements, or they may go through some strange, to us at least, strange processes to get to health. And it may not be the safest. So we want to accommodate to their culture if it's safe. If not, we want to negotiate a way for them to work with us and for us to work with them to provide a good, substantial prognosis in their health. Repatterning and restructuring, again, that might go along with negotiation. We want to restructure. We want to give them a plan that works well with their culture, their religion, their origins, their ancestry. We want to make sure that we're respecting them. So we can do that. Maybe helping with negotiation and repatterning. We're going to move on to the Purnell model. There's 12 domains to that. It's a little bit more simplistic than the Sunrise model. The first one is overview heritage. Where did that person come from? Second is communication. Paralanguage. That's very important. It's very important even if we have the same culture, because my eye contact, my eyebrows might be raised. That might be a little offensive, or that might be demeaning to somebody. Some cultures don't think it's appropriate to maintain eye contact with talking, so we want to be aware of that. If they're not making eye contact with us, then maybe we should try to wander our eyes a little bit. Family roles. Who's the head of household? Is it the female, the male, the grandpa? And the lifestyle. What's their lifestyle like? Workforce and acculturalization. Are they used to autonomy? Are they used to teamwork? Stuff like that. Bicultural ecology. How does that person metabolize drugs differently than, say, somebody from Italy? I know that Asians typically, their liver may not metabolize some of those drugs quite efficiently. So we want to keep in mind of labs when we're dealing with people of different cultures, because they may become toxic to those drugs. High-risk behaviors such as smoking and sex. Is this culture prone to sexual diseases such as HIV? Smoking. Is there family history or family culture? Is smoking involved? Because if smoking involves, then generally we can kind of see, hey, this family has a history of heart disease. And we can kind of go in and do some repatterning or structuring, negotiate, try to get them some nicotine supplements, stuff like that. We'll go on to pregnancy and childbearing. That's important. There's some cultures that will do things completely different. Some quite strange compared to us. I know that some cultures will do clitoral circumcision, and then some cultures may not use birth control, such as a lot of Catholics. They don't typically use birth control. Death rituals. Muslims, when a Muslim or sometimes even Hindus, when the body passes or the patient passes, the body has to be cleaned, and generally we don't do that. That's done by the family. And then during funeral processes, the orifices of the body, such as the nostrils and ears, will be plugged with some type of object. Spirituality, what is the meaning of life? My meaning of life may be different than yours. I may believe in reincarnation, and my patient may believe in nothing, or they may believe that they're going to go to heaven, you know. So I have to keep that in mind, not force my spirituality onto the patient, and be very open-minded when it comes to that. Healthcare practices, biomedical beliefs, some believe that, you know, this disease is caused by an evil spirit, and there's nothing you can say or do that's going to make me change my mind, sort of thing. The healthcare provider. This encompasses basically all these. As a healthcare provider, I should respect you. I am customizing care to suit your culture. So that's that. I really like the Purnell model very much. And then lastly we have Geiger and David Hazar's Transcultural Assessment Model. This is the most simplistic form, probably what most healthcare practitioners will use in the health field, just because it's very basic and we can get what we need rather efficiently. So they're all intertwined, so one can go to the other and so forth. So, culturally unique individual, me. I believe in different things, I have different rituals, different stuff like that. I view communication differently. Please don't look at me in my eyes when we're talking. So anyway, culturally unique individual, biological variations. That goes along with bicultural ecology. Environmental control. What's your environment like? Time. Are we living in the past or present? Social organization. Space. Is it appropriate to sit while you're standing? Or is it appropriate to stand 3 feet from you? Or should I keep a little bit of a distance? Is it appropriate to shake your hand when we meet or no? Communication, same type of thing, but a little different. Verbal gestures, you know, shaking hands, eye contact, you know, just stuff like that. So that is my cultural competence in nursing model and a summary. So hopefully it was pretty easy to understand. So I will move on now to my experiences, 1, 3, and 4. And I will try to keep in mind some of these things as I'm going through them. So my first experience was at Ashland University and the Eagles Landing room, and it was a Bangladesh married couple. They've been here a little under 3 years, I believe, is what they said. They basically went over their culture, and I found it rather interesting because, you know, when I would look at somebody dressed like them and the color of their skin, I would assume, which is something we should never do if we're trying to be culturally competent, I would assume that they were Indian, or they were from India. And they're not. So, based on their dress, the sari and the lungi is what the men wear. It comes down to maybe your mid-thigh. The women wear the sari, it comes a little long, it's maybe calf, a little longer, very bright, colorful. They talked about how beautiful their country was, how we should all visit. They were very enthusiastic about their country. You could tell they missed it very, very much. And they talked about marriage and their marriage and how important it is for them to keep a successful marriage and how many people they had at their marriage. And that really surprised me, considering in America a typical marriage may have maybe less than 100, no more than maybe 500. But she said they had over 3,000 people at their wedding. I found that very interesting and very expensive. That was interesting. They talked about how the primary industry there is the textile industry, and told us to go home and look at some of our clothing, the tags of our clothing, because more than likely it's from Bangladesh. And what do you know, I did, and I found several shirts that were made in Bangladesh, so that was interesting. All in all, I really like them. I think that their language is a beautiful language. So let's see if I can find some more facts about this language, or about this culture. Their language spoken is Bengali. I guess that's the language. Combination of words is Bengali. They're formerly known as the East Pakistanians, but they're not. They'd rather not be called that any longer. Let's see. Their primary nutrition, or their primary source of food is rice and fish. That's interesting. I don't really care for fish too much, so it would be hard to live there. The primary religions there in Bangladesh are Muslim and Hindu, with Muslim being the primary language according to her, the speaker from Bangladesh. But the Hindu and Muslims get along great, and she said that both religions participate in each other's festivals and stuff like that, and they get along very well. That's really neat. I like that. There's symbols of social stratification, according to agriculture.com, as one of the most obvious symbols of class status is dress, or your garments. Again, I went over this, but the men wear lungi, and it's like a cloth tube that hangs rather low. The women wear sari. And it's all based on economic status. So, who wears pants, who wears shorts, similar to here. Says here that the gender role of the household is women are traditionally in charge of household affairs and are not permitted to move outside of the neighborhood. So that's interesting. I also found this quite interesting too, is that the family unit of the Bangladesh people. The family unit is called a Barhi, is composed of a husband and wife, their unmarried children, their adult sons, and their wives and children. And grandparents may live there too, so that's a lot of people in one household. I'm just typically used to me and somebody else. So it also says here that the oldest man is usually the authority figure who makes the decisions. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with patients and their families, especially those from Bangladesh, because the older man may be the one to make decisions regarding life, support, and healthcare and stuff like that. Also keep in mind, this is good for me to know, and all male nurses, that, or female nurses, men and women do not shake hands. So never shake hand with a Bangladesh person, because their culture. But same-sex conversation is quite normal, and touching is quite common upon men-to-men or women-to-women interactions. Excuse me. In fact, open staring is not considered impolite. Here in America, if you're staring at somebody, that's considered impolite etiquette. So I guess there, if you just stare at somebody, it's fine. They also, I think I remember saying this, but prayer is performed 5 times daily. So we want to make sure that we accommodate prayer for the Bangladesh people, or Muslim people, I should say. Islam. The Bangladesh, the 2 primary beliefs and the religions that I talked about are the Hindus and the Muslims. We want to keep in mind that their beliefs, they believe in hot and cold properties of food, and the hot and cold is a remedy to certain diseases, and an imbalance of hot or cold intake could cause disease. So that could be disease etiologies. You know, maybe they're not receiving enough hot foods, or maybe they're consuming too much hot foods. And that is all for my first experience. I really enjoyed. I learned a lot from the Bangladesh speaking or the Bangladesh culture. We will go through the Vietnamese culture. I learned a lot by this interview, and that is, do not assume. I walked into the interview, she had candles lit, and this sort of house shaped, looked like a dollhouse kind of, but Asian, like there were Asian decorations. And there was coffee, candles, and a bagel. And that I asked during the interview what that was for, and she said because her father had passed, and they still have to provide those foods, hot and cold foods, so that way they can move on in their afterlife. So, one thing I would like to explain about the Vietnamese culture and the Buddhist culture and religion is that these people are very passive people. These people have, you may say, do you understand this medication, what you're supposed to use with it, the interactions, and you have to tell them, you have to make sure that they comprehend, because they will shake their head and smile until the sun stops shining, but guess what? They don't understand when you go home. They're very passive people. They don't like conflict. So, there's that. Age, they are taught from when they're walking that you are to respect elders and their decisions. Divorce is considered shameful for women. And let's see what else. Many Vietnamese are lactose intolerant, especially the elder. And another thing that we need to keep in mind is the majority of Vietnamese men tend to smoke. So we need to make sure that we're keeping in mind the accommodation, negotiation, restructuring, and stuff for their health. And most Vietnamese are Buddhist. And again, I'm just going to read something from ethnomed.org based on their what we should know as nurses. And I quote, "This system is based on the premise that living things are composed of 4 basic elements: air, fire, water, and earth, with these associated characteristics of cold, hot, wet, and dry. This cold, hot, wet belief system is very common to many Vietnamese, regardless of their educational status, occupation, rural, or urban. Many seek traditional herbal remedies, tonics, massages, and avoidance of excess as a pathway to good health." So I want to emphasize cupping. Okay, we might see a child come into the emergency room for, they may be coughing severely or something, and we may see on their back they might have what looks to be circular bruises, and we might assume, oh my gosh, they're being abused, but actually they've tried all these other remedies, such as cupping, which is done by heating the air of a cup with a flame and then placing it onto the skin. So it may look like they're being abused when really they're just doing their own home remedy. The Vietnamese people do not believe in mental illness, and they feel it is it's taboo. For example, some may not want life support. A lot of Vietnamese do not require life support. So, all in all, the Vietnamese culture, I think something we need to take away from them is that they are very passive. They will smile and nod their heads like they understand, but they're just very graceful people, so we want to make sure that they understand their plan of care. My 4th and favorite experience is the Macedonian culture. I can say that this culture is by far the funnest culture I have ever been around. I went to a wedding with my friend Nina Damaski. She is from Macedonia. She lived here for about 2 years. Her and her husband just got married, and I went to their wedding. They were I think, 2,500 people at the wedding. I'm going to show a brief video of their wedding dance and what I found to be really fun, because you don't typically see this in weddings anymore, so. Alright, that's just a brief example of their wedding. I don't want to keep this presentation too long, but their wedding was very fun. Lots of partying, lots of alcohol, lots of food. The food was amazing. Most Macedonians are Eastern Orthodox, so if you were to go into their church, which is East Columbus, off of Taylor Station, their church is magnificent, full of color, full of just bright colors, golds, reds, stuff like that. Their family tradition is very important to them. Their family dynamic is very important. It's similar to the Bangladesh, but typically the men will stay with the family and the wives will move in. Just very fun culture. And this was a great project, this was a great class. I learned so much about making assumptions towards other people, stereotypes. You know, there's nothing worse than being stereotyped when you're trying to get health care. So, this is my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, I hope it was easily understood, and I hope you learned something.